Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is the Managing Your Food Business Finances webinar hosted by the Economic Opportunity and Development Division. The division is housed in the Cambridge Community Development Department, or CDD, and is committed to building an inclusive and sustainable economy in the city of Cambridge. The division is responsible for a wide range of activities designed to meet the city's need for a vibrant, innovative, diverse, and thriving economic base that ensures economic opportunity for all. If folks are interested, you'd be welcome to visit our website. It's at cambridgema.gov/CDD/economic opportunity and development. This particular webinar is part of the Food Business Incubator Workshop series. We plan to have a couple more trainings coming up in the spring, so please check back for more information. And before I introduce our wonderful guests, I want to go over just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First and foremost, this webinar is being recorded as of now, and a copy of this webinar will be posted to the CDD website later on. All attendees probably are noticing that they are muted and have their video disabled. If you would like to, attendees are very welcome to use the Q&A feature to ask a question. I will be monitoring that Q&A feature throughout the presentation. I'll address any questions that I can, and if there are urgent ones for our guests, I will figure out a way to raise it during the presentation. We would also encourage attendees to use the Q&A to tell us if they have a food business right now or what kind of food business they would like to start and open up. And if they have a business name, by all means to share it. Last but not least, this is a webinar that if you need to step away and take care of kids, pets, run to the bathroom, by all means do so. And if folks would like, we do have a copy of the PowerPoint slides in Spanish. Folks would be welcome to use the Q&A feature to let me know that they would like a copy of it. Send me your email address and I'll email you a copy of the Spanish language slides.
Or the English slides. Right?
Or the English slides, thank you. Yeah, we'll offer it all. And that is a great segue. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce two incredible humans who are doing really great work in the world of restaurants and in food service industry. We have Henry Patterson and we have Lou Valena here with us today of ReThink Restaurants. I thank you both very, very much for your time. I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce yourselves and kick us off. Folks can probably hear I'm a little bit under the weather, so I might be off camera for a bit just to spare folks from watching me have any potential coughing fits. So take it away, ReThink.
Well, thank you. Look, I guess I'll ask Lou if you would like to say something now, since I'm going to be the one speaking primarily until you tell me, until you correct me.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here and great to, well, we can't see you, but it's great to be here and know that you're there. Please, as was already said, please ask questions. Please tell us what's going on, at what stage you're at. We'd love to hear so that we can kind of tailor things to your needs as best we can. Yeah, over to you, HPAT.
Okay. So hello, everybody. I wish I could see you, but if I can't, I'll cope. We've been talking about a really fundamental problem in our industry for a long time, and but it's really accelerated in the COVID and post-COVID era. That if you don't have a business that makes a profit and that actually pays you an appropriate amount for the work that you're doing, you're going to burn out. It's just a matter of time. And we live in a world where profit's a dirty word for a lot of people. It's the news is full of stories of people who either abuse their customers or abuse their employees or are fraudulent, but they're doing one thing or another, all because profit is all they care about. And the result of that endless stream of stories of people who care only about profit and have no other values is that you think of profit as something that's problematic, just to have it at all. But I have to tell you, you can't plan to be in business as a business owner for very long if you don't take making a profit as one of your basic responsibilities to everybody involved, not just to yourself. So food business, restaurants are exhausting. There's thousands of little transactions happening endlessly. And if you don't stay focused on it, it gets away from you. So we're going to look at understanding the business financially, understanding the economics of the restaurant. I can tell you that I started a restaurant when I was 24 years old. It was a few years ago. And I knew nothing about the economics. And I'm typical. Actually, I think most people who start restaurants as independent operators do it because they're passionate about the product that they want to make, or because they want to create community, or they want to host the party. But very few do it because they want to make money, or they assume that somehow they're going to make money, but they don't really know how that part of it works, nor do they concern. And I certainly didn't concern myself with that for a very long time before I realized that I was being irresponsible to everybody involved if I didn't take the economics more seriously. So that's because, and I grew that company to 6 locations. It became a pretty successful business. But when I sold it, which I did after 15 years of operating, it became my mission to help other people understand how critical it is to understand your business financially. So let's take a look at some basic jargon that we're going to be using in this discussion, and that I hope will become part of your vocabulary as you proceed with operating your food business.
Can I just add something really quick?
Sure.
I just also wanted to put in that I think the other piece that those of us who get into the food business, I also started a restaurant when I was at coffee shop. I was 25, and I only lasted for 5 years before I burned out, and that's why I'm doing this work as well. I think that it's very easy to walk around and see restaurants and coffee shops, all these places packed with people, and to say, "Oh, that must be a money-making machine." Like it looks like people are making money hand over fist. And the reality is that it's actually really hard to make money in this business. It doesn't mean that you can't make money. You absolutely can, but it takes work. It takes careful and thoughtful work, and really understanding these economics in order to do it.
Okay. Let's start with the top line. Revenue. Revenue is all the money that you're getting paid for the products that you're selling, that you're taking, and most of what you're taking in is revenue. But there's a couple of things that confuse the issue. One is meals tax. In Massachusetts, you sell something for $10, but you collect $10.70 because you're collecting money for the state in the form of a tax that you are then obligated to turn over to the state within 20 days of the close of the month. And that money that you take in is not your money, and it doesn't count as revenue. And you'll understand as we go along here why it matters that we don't include it in our calculations of how your business is doing. It's also the case that if you sell something like a gift certificate, that is not revenue. It isn't revenue until you actually redeem that gift certificate, but we'll get to that. But revenue is the first thing. That's the cash coming in. Now, if you didn't spend all that money on ingredients and rent and all the other things that you spent it on, it would become your profit. But most of it is going to get spent on the things that you need to buy in order to continue the business and to make all those products that you're selling. Now, there's a basic decision that we're going to make. Well, all right, let's go one more step here. You take in the money, it goes into your operating account. If it could stay there, it would be profit, but it's going to go out to either what we're going to call the prime costs or the overheads. And we're going to get into what those things are, and it's, you know, they're well labeled. The prime costs are the primary expenses of the business, and the overheads are the things that you have to endure in order to have a roof over your head. That's why it's called overheads. But what I want to say first is that you have a basic decision to make about what you do with the revenue. The typical and very widespread approach is you take money in, you spend it on all the things you need to, and if there's anything left, that's your profit. That while that's the normal way of doing things, there's actually some danger involved there, because there's a tendency to want to buy everything that you think you need to buy, and you will convince yourself, perhaps, especially in the earliest stages of your business, that if you don't make any profit, it's okay. That as long as you're not losing money. So, you know, people start out with this idea that they want to, quote, break even, unquote, which means that their revenue and their expenses are equal to each other, and it's okay if there's no profit. I'm here to suggest to you that you could take making a profit seriously from the very beginning of your business. And there is an idea that is called profit first. That's the notion that you take a percentage, a very small percentage of your revenue, and before you spend it on any of the things that you definitely need to spend it on, but you take a small percentage of it and you set it aside as profit. And you force yourself to make the business work with what's left after you've set that aside. You never go back and take that profit and bring it back into the operating account. The people that advocate this actually suggest that you set up a separate account or even put it in another bank and literally move it out of the account and in somewhere else and say, okay, well, and you may have, this may ring some bells or sound familiar for people who take their, have a job and they'll take part of what they earn and put it into savings or put it, set it aside before they spend any of their money on the things that they need to spend it on to live. If you, and there are books devoted to this strategy called Profit First. And I really do think that it's a powerful idea because of what I said earlier, that if you don't make a profit, you are going to burn out. So making a profit seriously from the get-go is an interesting thing. It's kind of a self-discipline. You start out with a very small percentage devoted to profit, taking it every 2 weeks and moving it out of the account. And then every 3 months, you increase the percentage that you devote to profit. That you little by little, you ratchet that up. Ooh. Sorry, let me turn that off. We'll come back to this and talk about it some more. But right now, let's look at the expenses. The prime costs are the primary costs that you're going to incur operating any restaurant or any food business are the ingredients that you are going to use to make your products and the team of people that you're going to need to actually do the work. The accounting terms for these are cost of goods sold, which gets abbreviated COGS, and you'll get accustomed to hearing people talk about their COGS. And what they're talking about is the cost of the goods that they need to sell, cost of the ingredients that go into the products. The direct labor expenses are the not only the wages that you pay to people, but also the taxes that you have to pay as an employer, health benefits, perhaps you're providing employee meals or other forms of benefits to your people, health insurance. Any of these expenses that are incurred because you have a team of people working in your business, these are the direct labor expenses. And in some businesses, the direct labor and the cost of goods sold are more or less comparable. When I first got into this business, it was normal to say 30% of your revenue should be devoted to cost of goods and 30% to direct labor. Typical restaurant, so that the total of prime costs would be 60% of or better of your revenue. But the truth is, these things interact with each other. If you buy very basic ingredients like flour and sugar, and you have a bakery and you need very skilled people to make those basic ingredients into pastry or cakes or things that requires particular skills and good controls, you might spend a lot less on cost of goods and a lot more on labor. In another setting, for example, in a lot of coffee houses will buy pastry already made, and they're going to spend a lot more on cost of goods. But since this stuff is already made, all they're doing is buying it and selling it. Their direct labor is potentially lower. but the combination of COGS and DL, of cost of goods sold and direct labor, we're going to tell you right now as a fundamental benchmark that you want to have those consume no more than 60% of your revenue. And depending on what your business strategy is, the COGS may be greater and the direct labor lower, or vice versa. Now, in recent years, we've woken up to the fact that most of the jobs in food service are woefully underpaid, and it's not sustainable. It's not a living wage for people to work in your restaurant, and so the pressure has been to grow what we're spending on direct labor, and this is correct. It's overdue. But we still have this problem that if you, and you'll see why shortly as we go along here, if you use up more than 60% of your revenue on your primes, you're going to have a problem. So if you were going to pay more for direct labor, it's inevitable that you're going to need to spend less on your cost of goods sold. What that turns out to mean is that you're going to charge more, and you're only going to spend, say, 20% of if you're going to sell an item for $10, you're not going to spend more than $2 on the ingredients, because you're going to need to spend $4 on your team. That's life in the restaurant business today. It used to be you would figure out that you're gonna, if you have your ingredients cost $2, you'd figure you'd sell it for $6. Those days are gone. You've got to be able to create something that you can sell for $10 out of that $2 ingredients cost, or maybe $2.50. But if you're going to spend $2.50 on the ingredients, you can't spend more than $3.50 on the labor. You see what we're saying here is that the 60% number doesn't go away just because we've finally woken up to what we need to spend on fielding the team. Now, we're leaving out, and now we're going to address the point that if your primes are at 30%, your overheads are going to be benchmarked for, in our system, you don't want to spend more than 30% of your revenue on overheads, because you're trying to leave yourself 10% profit. And if we were playing the profit first strategy, you'd start out setting aside 1 or 2% of your revenue, and then little by little you would increase that percentage until you were forcing yourself to make everything work with 90% of what you're taking in. Now, when we sit here and talk about it, it sounds like, of course I could do that. I can't imagine that I couldn't make it all work with $9 out of 10. But the vast majority of restaurant startups operate at break even or even at a loss, because people don't face the reality that they have to make it work with setting aside money for profit. We're going to talk about what you do with profit in this session as well, because the assumption that, profit is what somebody takes home and uses for their vacation money or whatever is not what we're talking about. There are responsibilities to the business that besides repaying the investors or rewarding the owners, that profit is needed to keep the business healthy. Well, let's keep going here. the cost of goods is something that you can plan, and then there's the reality. It's very normal to develop a menu and figure out the cost of the menu, the cost of the items on the menu, and use those costed recipes to figure out what your theoretical cost of goods is going to be. You know, you say, okay, this item is going to cost me close to $4, so I'm going to, you know, it's $3.70, you know, whatever. I'm going to sell it for 5 times that if I'm trying to achieve a 20% cost of goods. So I'm going to sell it for $19. Or I'm going to sell it for $19.95. But you know, I'm trying to make this work at using the benchmarks that we just talked about. But then you get the reality is when you look at what you've achieved a month later, that you've spent considerably more than that. And that's because we don't live in a perfect world. What's going to happen is that your costs are you know, your perfect costing of your recipes is one thing, but then there's the waste, the mistakes, the overportioning. God forbid, there's also theft. There's various disasters that occur on a regular basis in restaurants. There's refires. People get the wrong thing, and you got to make them. You know, it gets delivered to the wrong table, or you know, there's 100 ways in which the perfect world is this ideal, but it isn't the reality that you live in. There is always a gap between the theoretical cost of goods and the actual cost of goods. And our experience working with restaurants, and we've been doing this, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, is that as much as you set out to achieve a particular cost of goods, say you're targeting 25%, and you've set up your labor for 35. When you get the results at the end of a period of time, and you look at it, somehow you've spent 33% of your revenue on cost of goods. You set out to spend 25, and you're 8 points high. That sounds like somebody's really not paying attention. That's not the case. That's what happens over and over and over again in restaurants when we go in to start working with them, and we look at their costed recipes and compare it to what they're actually spending on cost of goods. The spread is typically 8 points, 8 percentage points. That means that thousands of dollars are being spent every month more than was planned. And that is largely because people aren't aware of the inevitability of that gap and the importance of getting the team interested in shrinking that gap, which is a basic strategy that we employ. We don't just try to solve this by having the owner clamp down on everybody about their portioning or their rotation of the products in the walk-in, or their waste, or their, you know, the way they key stuff in. It's got to be the whole team. Ideally, the whole team understands the inevitability of the gap and the opportunity that they have from their vantage to do something meaningful for the business, and to take charge from everybody participating in taking charge of shrinking that gap. Now, there is technology that helps with this. Thankfully we're increasingly in a time when there are really good tools to help people understand very quickly and very immediately how they're doing with their actual cost of goods as compared to their theoretical cost of goods. But let's go through this little formula here so you understand. If you wanted to calculate what your theoretical cost of goods is, you would take your cost of recipes and you'd multiply it by what's called a sales mix. Let's say you sell 100 of this item on your menu and 60 of that item and 70 of that item, and each of those items has its particular cost of goods associated with it. So in order to get your theoretical, you would multiply the cost of goods of item A times how many of that item you sold, and you'd add that likewise to item B and item C, and you'd get this theoretical cost of goods. But then you'd have to look at your actual to compare, and to do that, you need to see, how many dollars of ingredients you started the period with, plus your purchases. That gives you a total amount of available goods to work with, and then you're going to have some remaining at the end of the period that you're measuring. So if you want to see what you used, you would subtract the remainder from the sum of the starting inventory and the purchases, and that would tell you what you used up. And you compare that to your perfect world cost of goods. It's always more, but how much more is it? And there are many, many reasons for the gap, like we said. But if we can get that gap down to 2 points, that's a healthy, really healthy, and for sure, it would be shocking to me if it wasn't a very profitable business when you get that gap shrunk to 2%. Let's keep going. Direct labor includes, as we've said, all of these expenses around the payroll. There's employer's responsibility for taxes, not just the withholding, but the match that the employer makes. There's expenses involved in advertising for people and hiring them and training them. And there's benefits, and there's workers' comp, and there's all of this stuff adds up really quick. And you know what? Like cost of goods, there is also a theoretical and an actual and a gap on direct labor, because your schedule is one way to think about this is that when you make out a schedule, you're planning to spend a certain amount of money on the team, and then at the end of the payroll period, you get a payroll report, and it shows you what you actually spent. And once again, it's very common for there to be a significantly more spent than was planned. And why is that? Well, because people sign in early, they leave later than they were scheduled. Perhaps when somebody calls out, the person that gets drafted to replace them on the schedule is paid a higher rate, or actually goes into overtime. So managing the scheduling of staff is also a critical element here. The biggest cost by far is employee turnover. It is, to us, the most egregious truth about our industry is that the turnover is horrible, and it is so expensive. And we could and should, devote a whole nother workshop to the question of what are the keys to employee retention. And I can tell you without dwelling on it now that it has to do with making meaningful jobs. You can't just make mindless, repetitive jobs for people and expect them not to turn over. It's just inevitable. So while you're focused on creating a cool menu, how about creating a cool place to work? Because if you don't, you're gonna spend a fortune on turnover. All right, so after we get through the primes, there are 5 categories of overheads, and we're going to rip through these because they are the smaller problem. The fundamental problems are the ones we've just touched on: controlling your cost of goods and planning a workplace that really is compelling to your staff. So there are direct operating expenses that are unique to food businesses. You have to maintain your facilities in a sanitary way. So you have various you have linens, and you have cleaning supplies, and you have there's a whole list of things that you wouldn't have to buy if you weren't particularly in the food business. But the reality is that's a significant overhead that you can't get away from. The second group is maintenance and repairs. People have a tendency not to spend on maintenance, which is a mistake because they end up spending on repairs, and repairs are a lot more expensive when they're emergencies. Maintaining your equipment means that you and your facilities mean that you devote time and attention to these things when those are scarce commodities. And but it's one of the imperatives of succeeding in this game, that you actually take maintenance seriously and seek to minimize repairs. One of the best things you can do is to give each of your pieces of equipment a name and treat it like it's a person that needs to be cared for, and get your whole team to care for it, rather than just beat on it. Marketing and promotion, this group of expenses is actually the one place that we find that people underspend. You have to take seriously the imperative to promote your brand, and it's become a digital world, and the marketing online is a really significant piece of the business now. But I can tell you, it has never stopped being the case that the personal marketing that you do, the personal connection that you or your team makes with your guests, is still the heart of the matter. And devoting time and attention to making a connection with your guests and making them feel important, and listening to them. These are fundamental strategies that get, I think, is underappreciated in the world of focused on the digital piece.
Yeah, comping meals for a regular once in a while is a wonderful use of the marketing and promotion budget, because that gets them talking to their friends, and talking at the water cooler about the most incredible place they went to and that they love that place and they always get treated like royalty when they go there.
Yeah. You know, we've Lou and I have talked about and we've talked about this with our clients many times. You want to create some of your guests. You want them to become part of your team in the sense that you count on them for feedback, and you can deputize them as people who routinely give you feedback and take it seriously. And then when you're going to launch a new menu, you invite them in to try, all these kinds of things that you can do to make your guests advocates for your restaurant is time and money really well spent. And it's underappreciated. Administrative and general expenses are expenses that you would incur no matter what kind of business you would have. You have to have insurance, you have to have telephones, you have to have office supplies, you have to have stuff like that, bookkeeping, legal, license, whatever. That's just a business expense that you can't escape. And then occupancy, this group of expenses is the rent, the utilities, the water bill. Some of these things are not even things that once you've made the deal for the rent, you can't really do anything to shrink that, unless you go back and say we need to renegotiate the lease, which is something that we've gotten involved with on occasion, but that is less normal. You can control your utility bills, especially your water bill, with a little bit of effort and a little bit of we like to gamify these things. I love putting up on the wall in the kitchen how many gallons of water we used last week, and challenge the team to shrink that number and post it up, see how it trends weekly. But all of these things pale in comparison to the control of the primes. So let's go back to the question of profit. This is our profit first slide. I knew it was here. I just didn't know where it was. Sorry. But this is the argument that you could, and you don't start out taking the full 10% of the revenue and setting it aside, but that's where you want to get to. You want to get to where you're going to achieve that profit because you take 2% initially and you make do with the 98%. And then after we do this quarterly, you notch that up to 3%, and now you're saying in this quarter we're going to make it work with 97% of our revenue, until you get and it takes a couple of years, but you get to 10%, and you've built habits around working with what's available after that profit's been set aside. You do this, your business is still going to be here at 2 years, 3 years in. And if you don't, it might not. Or it'll be there, but you'll have worked for all that time without paying yourself properly, and without having any money to work with to grow the business, which is where we want to talk about the profit and the uses of profit. One of the uses of profit is return to investors, which, by the way, do you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. So, the owner or other investors could get some of that profit, but before you ever do that, if you're really caring about and responsible for your business, you're going to use that profit for some other things. The first thing is that if you use debt, if you had to borrow in order to build the business, you've got to pay that debt back. You've got to service that debt. And nobody's going to loan you any more money if you don't service that debt. In fact, they're going to create a lot of problems for you. So your first use of profit is to make sure that you are servicing any debt that you incurred in order to create the business. You will inevitably have to replace pieces of equipment. And, if you're talking about, a $3,000 oven or a $5,000 mixer or whatever, a dough mixer, these things are not expenses of the business this month. These are things that you capitalize, which is to say, you consider that they have a useful life of 7 years or 10 years or something, and you take 1/7 of their cost annually as one of your direct operating expenses, but you don't take the entirety of it as an expense. It's not. It's you buy this thing for thousands of dollars. It's still, you just have money tied up. That it's a use of profit to buy capital equipment, and there may be new things that you're going to want to add that are going to be labor saving or that are going to give you better results. So being able to buy a piece of equipment is only something you can do if you have the money to do it. And this is a fundamental use of profit, is to keep your facilities and your equipment fresh and appropriate for the work that you're doing. You may have opportunities to expand, and can you seize those opportunities if you are already strapped? No. But if you can create, and actually I should have gone this way first, if you can create a cash reserve, which is to say you sit that profit in an account where it's there and you don't need it to get through this month or this year of the business. You have that money there when there's some, we've had situations where you get, there's increasingly, actually, there's horrible storms, flood, God knows what. And can you still pay your people? Well, yes, if you have a cash reserve, you can do something that your team will hopefully never forget, because you have provided for those situations. Likewise, if you have an expansion opportunity, can you seize it? Well, yes, if you have the cash reserves. The other thing that we didn't mention is that you have to pay income tax as a business. So one of the first things that does happen to your profit is that some of it goes to the state and the Fed, and it's part of being, we always try to minimize how much tax we're going to pay, but it is part of what it means to be a company in America, that you can create a business like this for yourself, but you do also then have an obligation to pay your share of taxes. There are some people who have been prominent in the news lately who have made quite a game of not paying any taxes, and it's
Notice,
we're not going to go there. We're not going to get
no, but I want you to all notice that one thing that is not listed under the 7 uses of profit is creating a giant bathtub full of cash, a la Scrooge McDuck. I think that's what people think the profit is. It's like a bathtub of gold coins that you can swim around in. Yeah. It's all stuff that comes up.
We ask, when we are working with a new team, a new client, we'll ask the team we'll interview people one by one, or we'll give them a form to answer some questions, and we'll say, what do you think the revenue of the business is, and what do you think the percentages are that go to things like profit and prime costs and so on. And of course, the owners don't even know, but the people that work in restaurants have no idea. They will typically think that profit could be 30, 40, 50% of revenue, and they think that the owner is taking it home in a wheelbarrow. And little do they know that the owner can't even pay themselves, and they're living on their spouse's job income, and they are struggling with servicing the debt they created to build the business, and so on and so on. Now, if you can get to where you're so healthy that you're making that 10% profit and then some, and there are restaurants that achieve 15, 16, 18, 20% profit. They're extraordinarily busy, and they're very well controlled, and they're tightly managed. And typically, the ones that are really able to do that and sustain it have a team that's really committed to making it all happen, and that team gets profit shared. That's where we really want to get to. You want to get to where you have a team that understands your business and cares about the business and gets rewarded for managing it successfully. So if you have profit to share, it's a great use of the profit. It's the best use of the profit. It's the most, to me, the most personally rewarding use of the profit is to be able to do that. Now let's look at costing the menu. We're going to do this as an exercise, and if we identify an item, maybe you have an item in mind. If there's anybody wants to suggest an item that they are making or planning to make, maybe you could share that with us in the chat. And
I have an example on the next slide with pie crust, I think.
Yeah, well,
we could do something else. Yeah,
we could go to the pie crust, but we have time to look at an item of from the audience if we can get one. Do we have anything, Christina?
No, I was just saying I'm taking a look, but no one's chimed in yet. So if you guys have a good example, I would say go for it.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna take a look at an item, and we're gonna the first thing we're gonna do is convert its recipe into weight measurements. It isn't necessarily how you buy it initially, but you want to be able to say with confidence that every time you plate that menu item, you use up so many ounces or so many grams of each of the component ingredients, and you need to be able to associate those weights with their costs and figure out what you're spending every time you sell that item. And then we're gonna, well, let's go ahead and look at the pie crust, because I guess if we get,
it's a little easier to talk about. Yeah,
when you're concrete, you're right. Okay.
But when you go out and do this yourself, we really recommend starting with the simplest item that you have. That will still make a big difference. It's not like a simple item that you never sell. Make it something that's meaningful to you, but the simplest thing that you do, and it may be a finished dish, but it also may be a component. In this case, pie crust is definitely a component of a pie, usually, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So if you're making a lot of different pies, one of the things you do is you make pie crust in a batch, and then you have in this case we're showing a batch that would yield 50 pie crusts, right? So ultimately we're going to figure out that each of those crusts costs 14 cents. But
These are tiny pies.
these are individual.
These are little pies, yeah.
Little
For the
individual
record.
pies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Delicious.
So first thing we're going to do is look at the entire recipe, and it's 600 grams of flour, and of course, you buy butter by the pound, but we're going to turn that into 454 grams of butter, and we're going to note also that there's 12 grams of salt, though that's going to add like less than a tenth of a cent or something to the final portion, but that's all right. It's there. It is an ingredient, and you do spend those 6 cents, so let's include it. So to find the weight of each of these things, we found that you bought flour in 50-pound bag, and you paid $34.90, which is shocking, actually, by the way, because I remember when a 50-pound bag of flour was like $12.
That's
But
a fancy flour. I think it's like a special King Arthur
no, but
flour or something.
I'm going back many years when I say I paid $12 for a bag of flour. I think $34.90 is not that unusual now, no matter what your flour is. I know I have a pizzeria client who's buying freshly milled flour out of Montana, and it's over $50 for 50 pounds. So it's $34.90 in this case for 50 pounds. So that ends up, if you do the conversion to grams, to 0.00154 per gram, and the butter is 0.013 per gram, and so on. And then if you, and this is part of how people never do this, because it's intimidating for people, and they don't like math, and they don't want to struggle with these things. And I do acknowledge that. Go for it.
Yeah, one thing that I want to say about that, once you get started, it really starts to happen pretty quickly. But make use of the tools available to you. Like Google actually has a really great little conversion tool right on the search page. If you just say like grams to pounds and then put in 50 pounds, it'll tell you how many grams there are in 50 pounds immediately. So like there are steps that you can kind of, there are shortcuts out there.
Yeah, there's tools that'll help you get this done. So it turns out that you're going to spend, no surprise here, the really expensive piece of this is the butter. You're going to spend 92 cents on the flour and $5.90 on the butter, and of course the 6 cents of salt. So you end up with a total spend to make this batch of $6.88. And if you're going to weigh that out or add up those weights, you'll find it's a total of 1,500 grams. Is that right? Is that where we were?
In this case, it's pie crust, so there's water in there too. So
that's what's missed. All right. So the water, for which we're not assigning any cost here, brings it up to 1,500 grams. And then if one portion is 30 grams, you're going to get 50 portions. So you can divide that 688 by 50 to get your portion cost of 14 cents. Now, this seems very far removed from making pie and selling it, but it's a necessary step, because we're going to need to know what the cost of each of those pies is in order to decide what to charge for it. And then we're going to want to see how we do in the real world compared to this is the perfect world cost.
This exercise means a lot to me personally because I had to learn this the hard way. I had a coffee shop that was very famous at the time for our toast. We were serving toast before it was cool, and we loved serving these really thick slices of bread, and it was so beautiful. It was such a delicious dish, and people loved it. And it wasn't until I had been operating for, I think, over a year, and I did this exercise, I realized we were actually losing $1 on every order of toast that we were selling. We were not even covering the cost of the ingredients because we were charging such a small amount for it. We just didn't know. I just didn't know. It seemed like the right amount of money to charge.
Yeah, it's just a slice of bread, right?
It's like a slice of bread, and there's obviously, like, you can't possibly charge more than, I think, whatever, $2 or $3 or something. It can't charge more than that for toast. But it was a pretty huge portion of toast that we were that we were giving them, and it was not covering our costs.
If you butter it, or you put, God forbid, you put avocado or whatever on there, and before you know it, you have to get $10.
Yeah, and if you're grinding your own really special cinnamon, and you have 2 different types of cinnamon that you're using in my case, and you're really getting into it, then yeah, it's gonna add up. So don't make the mistake that I did, and just just do it. You will be so happy when you do, even though it will take some work. It isn't going to be as bad as you think it is.
We have a list of resources here at this one, and what's not on here, and that I've been thinking about and talking about today is though we'll talk about each of these for a minute shortly, but I want to add to this list a different book by Pat Lencioni. The Ideal Team Player is an important book, but there's another book that Pat wrote called The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And because turning your people over turns out to be the biggest source of waste in our business, it's worth spending a minute talking about employee retention and what makes a miserable job, or inversely, what makes a good job. And the first of those 3 things is, and I didn't prepare a slide about this because I didn't know I was going to be talking about it, but it's really, to me at the moment, it's just feeling like this is so critical to say to people. The first thing that makes a job miserable is anonymity. Working in a place where nobody knows your name, nobody gives a damn about who you are. And if you don't take the time to really get to know the people that work for you, it will cost you. And it's a shame. Anyway, I mean, everybody has a life story, and if you're smart running a food business, you will know the highlights of that life story of everybody that works there. You will know, what they're up against in life and what they're setting aside when they come to work in your restaurant. It's pretty tough when it's 20, 30, 50 people, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to know who your people are as people. And ideally, everybody's name who works for you. If you don't know everybody's name, something has gone wrong. If you have a place with 100 people in it, it's damn challenging. But I can tell you that people who really understand the emotional level of life in the restaurant, they know everybody's name. The second thing that makes that's critical for making a decent job is relevance. It has to be important to somebody that you do the job that you're doing well. Presumably it matters to the guests, but maybe you're in an somebody in an administrative role needs to know that they're doing their job accurately and correctly really matters to you as the owner of the business. But it doesn't. The people that are washing the dishes, they can think of this as a shit job, but it's not. It's a critical job for the restaurant to really function correctly. And try running a restaurant when the dish people don't show up. It's a really essential job. So there's I had this up earlier. The third thing is they need to be able to measure for themselves how they're doing. Pat Lencioni calls it a miserable job is one where you just can't gauge your own progress, that you're dependent on somebody else telling you that you're doing a good job. But if I know that I was set out to make 100 dozen pie crusts or whatever today, and I did, I know I can measure whether or not I got through my prep list, or I can, as a server, I can tell what my sales were, what my percentage tip was. There's a lot of different ways to measure and quantify performance, but ideally, everybody would have a way to be able to figure that out for themselves without being told by anybody else whether or not they did their job or did a good job of what they're. And so if they have a place where people know who they are, where and care about who they are, ideally, and they can be confident that their job is important in some way to somebody, and they can tell for themselves whether or not they've got a decent level of performance calculated for themselves. Those are fundamental. Without those things, it's very, very tough to expect people not to want to go find another job. And you would think that anybody who manages a business would pay attention to these things and take these things seriously, but it's actually very rare. You could be one of the only employers who goes out of their way to make sure that people are known and really cared about, and who understand how the work that they're doing affects the business or affects the guests, or where you've gone out of your way to make sure they understand the importance of their doing their job well, and where you've created a means for them to measure it for themselves. If you can do these things, you are going to reduce the turnover of your restaurant, and it's by far the biggest waste factor in our business. And people have calculated what it costs. It's thousands of dollars every time somebody quits and you have to start over with somebody else, because the new person is going to have to get interviewed, they're going to have to eventually get hired, they got to get trained, they're going to make mistakes until they become more adept at doing their job, and then they're going to or if people are miserable It's going to have all kinds of other impacts on the way other people do their jobs. So it just goes on, and it's we're in a people business, and it's a team sport that we're playing. You've got to take seriously caring for your people. Christina, up because you want to say something?
Hi. Yeah, I was just gonna check in because we've got probably about like 15 minutes left at the most if we want.
Okay.
So I thought I would check in with both of you just to sort of see either if you wanted to share additional thoughts, like if there were other sort of funny stories about like, oh, look what happened when I finally did that one evaluation on the toast piece on my menu. Like lessons learned over the years about like financial stuff that comes up that was very formative for you. Or if you wanted to talk about anything else, I've been monitoring our Q&A and there haven't been any specific questions that have come in yet.
Okay.
I would love to actually just quickly put it in that relevant thing, the relevance about making a job relevant. I found that the most effective way to do that is to, we talked a lot about gloom and doom. And a lot of the things we've talked about have sounded really gloom and doom.
Oh,
Unfortunately, but there's a really good, deep, beautiful reason why all of us get into the food business. We're chasing something, we're chasing excellence in something, we're looking to provide these beautiful experiences for other people. There's these like personal reasons why we get into it and stories. And making sure that you have a really good mission statement and really making sure that you have really solidified that reason for why this business exists, and then sharing that with your team in a way that actually means something is a really helpful way to do that. And sharing your vision for the business, because I think a lot of times people think that when they go into business, they have to be these like lone soldiers out there at the head of the at the head, like forging ahead, and everyone's just going to blindly follow them. But it really makes a big difference if you can share your vision for where you want the business to go with your people and why it's important, and then help them to help it to become important for them too, and to kind of fall in love with that mission, fall in love with that vision, and be willing to give their time and excitement to that. And that actually adds something, because everybody brings different experiences to things, and can help invent things and make things better, and it can really create a big improvement. So that's been something that I've found along the way for sure.
When you have a team of people, it might be 20 people or something. There is so much intelligence there and so much knowledge of the nitty-gritty of your business that most owners and managers don't tap. They just don't realize that they could learn things from the experience of their team, who are actually making the product day in and day out, or interacting with guests consuming that product, or making decisions to buy that product. And tying what you can learn from your people with your mission and the intention of the business is easy to overlook. But it's that tapping that intelligence and applying it to your mission is, I think, how I succeeded. I didn't. The vast majority of what was created in our menu was created by people on the team, who, and a lot of it started by their using ingredients to make employee meals that were different from what was already on the menu, but the ingredients were there. Or they say, oh, if we just could add this, we could do that. Or but we won a lot. We won 9 Best of Boston awards for food that I never created any of it. We tapped the team. and they knew that they were that was, you know, that was possible. There were a lot of things on the menu that were named for people on the team. And I still hear, I mean, it's been a lot of years since we sold the restaurants, but people was, oh, do you remember the pie in Peppo's Honor, or Gloria's salad, or whatever? It was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I remember Gloria too. She was a pain in the ass. boy, was she smart. It was, well, suffice it to say, the team it's all about the team. You know, we can talk about the numbers, and we have to watch the numbers, but the key to the deal is growing the team, respecting the team, including the team.
I think I think that's a lovely note to end it on, maybe.
Okay.
I think that it's been wonderful to be able to listen to the expertise that the both of you have in this field about how to think about the finances, how to think about how all the different pieces of the business, and especially the team, plays a key role in finances. If there had once been sort of a model that envisioned a restaurant run by one person who holds all the information and all the decision making tools, it feels like that's really, really starting to change these days. I think the only maybe parting question I would have for the both of you, and I don't know if this is something you're not comfortable stepping into, definitely let me know. But I think some restaurants that I've been working with have expressed a little bit of concern about how to figure out how to take an existing setup that they already have and try to either set up a better pay for back of the house, or set up a sort of fund where it goes to a select few people in the business, or just the fact that they're aware that, you know, minimum wage has been rising as it should, and that those rates are going up in Massachusetts. So I don't know if you both in your experience have seen if there's any even just like little things that existing businesses can do now to start to shift some of that financial work so that it feels as if the business as a whole is getting taken care of.
Mhm. Well, so Lou, I'm sure you have things you want to say about it, but I'll say one thing quickly. Uh, there is law which interferes with, and it was originally set up with the intention of protecting uh, the tipped employees from having their tips taken from them and used to run the business. So there's the law says you can't share tips with people who are not guest facing, who don't interact with guests, which means that the front of the house people, if it's a sit down, you know, a service such situation, the people who are interacting with the guests keep all the tips, and the people that are sweating it out in the kitchen cannot participate in those funds. And so people have started adding a small percentage to the total check as a kitchen compensation, back of the house staff, and found ways to do that are legal. And I everything I've heard has been that the guests have been accepting that and are understand people. I think people understand it and are willing to have it happen. Lou,
Yeah, I was just gonna say there are a couple of restaurants. I live in JP, and there are a couple of restaurants here in JP that do that. And yeah, Brassica and Tres Gatos also does that.
Tres Gatos, so I think was early with this stuff.
Yes, very early. And yeah, it's great. I mean, they have, I think, 20% or something line item that's listed as an admin charge. And there's a whole explanation for it on the menu, you know, and on the bill. But it really it really, I think it really changes the dynamic, because it instead of it being this like, it really makes the guest feel like they're part of something bigger. And there's a whole community here. It's a really nice, I think it really brings a nice quality to the restaurant, while also making it a more sustainable business model for the people who are working behind the counter.
Yeah, do you know Rebecca Keene? She's one of the owners of Brassica, and her brother's the chef and so on. But she's taken this very seriously, and she's spent some time and money with attorneys on making sure that what they're doing is legal. And I know that she has told me that she would welcome anybody checking in with her about how to do this properly. And not, because if you do it wrong, you could find yourself up against some very expensive fines and stuff from because you're supposed to have various taxes on it if you don't do it right. So JP, for whatever reason, is kind of the epicenter of this strategy in our awareness, and those are both cool restaurants too. So there you go.
I appreciate that. I think maybe we've got some people on the webinar today who are going to be part of the next group of people making all the next great notable food businesses and restaurants. No doubt, thanks to the help of you both today and all the other great resources that are out there too. I think before we close out officially, I should just give a chance if there's anything else that you wanted to add or any info that you wanted to put out there at the last minute. Folks on this webinar would be welcome to contact me for any reason at all. You can get me on my email address at work. It's cdelicio. So that's CDILISIO at cambridgema.gov. Or give me a call if you want, 617-349-4601. Happy to call anybody back. But if there's anything else that you folks would like to add to, I think we're in a place to probably sign off for the night.
Henry, do you want to advance the next slide? I think our email addresses are on the next slide. If anyone wants to reach out, I think. Yes, there we go.
There they are. Thank you. May I also say that C. Delicio launched the food truck community when she was in Menino's office back in the day, and has done a lot of other things to advance the food community of Boston and greater Boston, and now Cambridge particularly. And I'm grateful to know you.
Oh, likewise, thank you. I don't feel like I've done much. I feel like I have a lot more that I could maybe be helpful with, but it's very kind of you to say. I think it's been actually pretty remarkable to see how much has changed and grown in the greater Boston area, like in the last 20 years. It's incredible. There are so many like really talented people and really savvy entrepreneurs who like they just get it and they're knocking it out of the park.
Well, let's all carry on. You can get us, and we're happy to talk with people on the phone. We don't have a meter running, for first conversations, and we're happy to help.
We love talking to people about businesses. So please track us down.
Well,
if no one else calls you, I definitely will. I'll be thrilled to talk to you both again sometime soon.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've gotten together, so let's do that.
That would be lovely. Lou and Henry, I want to officially thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you to everybody that attended this webinar, and I'm going to sign us off. Have a good night, folks.
Okay, good night.
Thank you. Night.
Okay.